Hi everyone, and welcome to the 7th episode of Yeshiva League Pass Faceoff. I'm your host Josh Cass, and I want to let you know really quick who we're sponsored by, and that's the Weiselberg Law Firm. For 16 years, you've entrusted Elliot with the growth and guidance of your kids, and now it's time to let him do the same for your family's most important asset, your home. Admitted in both New York and New Jersey, Elliot can help guide you through any residential or commercial purchase, sale, refinance, or lease with championship quality and award-winning care. If you're looking for your commercial coach or a new home is your goal, reach out to the Weiselberg Law Real Estate Services today at 917-952-2597, or you could also reach out to them by emailing wiselawesc@gmail.com. Reminding everyone once again, that's the Weiselberg Law Firm. Please choose wisely. So we're back on Instagram Live for the first time in a long time. Our first episode of the season came out on this platform, and we're back here as we have a very special guest who's just about to join us. So let's just bring him on really quick. Shia Forgash, the starting goaltender for the TABC Storm in the JV hockey this past season. And what a season it was. Shia, welcome to the show,
Josh?
And thank you so much for being here. So for anyone who's unaware, just in that response, Shia was one of my players in Camp David this past year. I coached him, and just overall great player, even better kid. And Shia, I don't know about you, but I was broadcasting that junior varsity championship game along with Elliot Weiselberg and David Kolb, who was also part of it, doing the color commentating. And we spoke a lot about what both teams had to offer, and we spoke specifically about the goaltending matchup, and both in both you and Josh Popilski on the DRS side of things, that both of you were first-time starters playing in a big setting really for the first time. And with that being said, experience kind of goes out the window, yet stays level within both sides, because of the fact that sure, you both haven't been starters before, but both of you guys have been starting all season long. So I really just want to say, in my opinion, for what I knew about you and about Josh going into the game, that there really wasn't much of a question to the fact that both of you guys were going to step up in a big game like this after a full season under your belt. 12 games each, to my knowledge. Or was it 11? Yeah, 12th game was the championship. Sorry. So yeah, that's kind of like where we're at. But it's a pleasure to have you on. And I mean, let's get right into it. So, the first thing that I have to ask is, coming off a championship, I know that it's been just over 2 weeks, but how does it feel? What's
especially
it like?
coming off the loss from last year. Great bounce back, and yeah, it felt amazing to hold the trophy.
Yeah, I can't speak to that, like having not won any championships in Yeshiva League, having seen it happen in middle school. Crazy thing. I was just at the Hank Halb championship game last night in Hafter, where Hank pulled out a crazy victory. But we're not here to talk about that at all. We're here to talk about the success that you had during the regular season as a team, and specifically what you did in that championship game. So let's kind of flash back a little bit. Let's go towards the start of the season when you guys knew you had a good team in TABC. A lot of returning faces from last year. Elliot, myself, and Avidan on the broadcast last year, when we were talking in the intermissions, and when Elliot was talking about it in the pregame with David Kolb last year when you played DRS and lost, that before the game had actually taken place, if you look at the DRS side of things, they've got a good mix of 9th and 10th graders who are going to see equal time and lots of action and play significant minutes. On TABC's side, though, while they might be a little bit more sophomore heavy on their top line, they are entirely freshmen on their second line, their third line, and even a defenseman, Arya Ezekiewicz, was starting as a defenseman, as a freshman last year. And I know that you weren't necessarily part of that mix, but coming into this year, that meant you guys were going to be predominantly sophomore. A lot of you guys were going to have great experience and just overall a great knowledge or sense of what you guys needed to do in order to come back stronger this year and ultimately get over that hump and achieve the goal of bringing a championship to TABC, which isn't the first time it's happened, and I'm not even going to get into that history. But at the end of the day, what was it like when you found out you had received the starting job, when you knew that Speak of Josh and Jay Rob all decided they were going
To
to
be
roll with
honest,
you
I
as
don't
their
think I
starting
deserved at the
goalie.
beginning of the season. I felt I really was bad at camped out of it and going into the beginning of the season. I didn't deserve it at all, but then I kind of bounced back, and once I got my confidence as a starter, then I kept on going, and then we ended up winning the chip. So
Yeah, and I want to speak to that because clearly, sometimes obviously not sometimes, it does take confidence from a player in themselves to be able to have that type of performance, whether it be a game or an entire season. But with that being said, when I interviewed Aiden Rousman, he spoke about what a big part of your success the coaches play in your three coaches that you have. And not to mention them again, but sometimes them showing confidence in their players also turns the tide. I think it clearly did here. And that moves on to the next question. You faced many different, teams this year. You faced a lot of adversity, some that weren't necessarily as strong, some that might have been right there with you. In your opinion, what really helped you find your confidence going down, going as the season,
so like at
pushed
the beginning of the
along?
season, when I really wasn't sure if I was going to start at all, then I really wasn't confident. I didn't know if I didn't have any. I don't know how to explain it. I wasn't supposed to start the second game. I had no confidence. I was terrible. And then once I began to start playing more, then I got more confident myself, and then I started playing better. And then once we got to the DRS and SAR games, for big games, I played pretty good, and then I started to gain confidence myself. And then going into the playoffs, I was ready full confidence, and yeah.
So I want to transition now. You touched on it a little bit through the regular season. You touched on DRS and SAR being tough challenges you guys faced during the regular season, and you met both of them twice during the season, if you include the playoffs and championship as well, because you played SAR in two regular season games, DRS in a regular season game, and in the championship. So now let's transition a little bit towards later on in the year. You guys were very close with SAR in the standings. You brought up the Sting. And I'm just curious, what was your mindset going into that second game? I know that when I talked about it on the podcast with Elliot, and I think Abidjan was part of that talk as well, where he said, if you really want to look at SAR's JV team, even though statistically they may have been right there with a chance at taking the division, there weren't really many other teams that could have stepped in your way. You guys were likely going to make it to the final one way or another because you would have just matched up against a different team in the East that wasn't DRS. Similar to the way that, DRS matched up with they matched up with SAR in the semis. So they probably would have stuck on each other because the seeding would have been different. But my question to you is that was really, I don't want to take away anything from any other game you played prior, but I know that, your second SAR game really essentially was the game that sealed your fate as the winners of that so-called West Division. It's not actually like Eastern Conference, Western Conference. We call it back in middle school. I know it's called the Jersey League and the Long Island League, but so to speak, for the East and West, for you to lock that division up by knocking off SAR and completing the sweep, what was that like, and what was really going through your mind going into that game and as
Going to the first
that game
SAR
went
game, I
along?
really didn't realize how good they were, how much stacked they were. But then by the time that was my worst game, the first SAR game. So going to the second one, I was kind of nervous, but I remember it's an after school game, so you can't really think about it for too long because you have school the whole day, whatever. So I was nervous, but I knew that we'd probably win because we have a good team, and that's what a coach said to me. One time at the SAR when they let up a goal and I got mad, the coach messaged me like, "We have a really, really good team. We're gonna come back. Don't get over yourself and just get over it and move on because we have a all-star team, so we're gonna pretty much win."
So now transition into that second game. What was different about that allowed? Because it seemed like you guys had much more control in that second game, just being ahead wise than you did in the first game. What changed for, what would you say changed for your team,
I
and what
think
changed
as
for you
that was
specifically?
our first SAR game. It was our first game versus no Fresh was okay, not bad at all. SAR was really our first big game against a really good team, so that was our first time experiencing that good of a roster. So then by the second time, we were ready to face them and realize how good talent, how to play against them.
Okay, so now let's transition. We've gone through the beginning part of the season, through the middle and the end of the regular season. So now let's talk some playoffs here. So you had I don't want to necessarily call it a luxury, but if you hear why, you had the so to speak, the luxury of being pulled in the semifinal game because you guys were up, what was it, like 5, 6 goals on North Shore in the semis, which I don't think a lot of people really expected for the way they had, in terms of the way they had played during the regular season. That being said, they had not faced an animal like you guys. I know they faced DRS and they were a great team, but you guys were better than DRS this year and in your own gym on a different level than almost any other team, just period. So my question to you is, what was your sort of mindset going into that game? And when you got pulled, we'll get to it in the next question actually, but I'm just curious as I'll touch on it after. What were you thinking about overall just going into that game and after you got pulled
Going into
for the
game, a
rest
lot of people are
aspect?
telling me that like our whole team's like way too cocky for this game. It's not true at all. Everyone is very scared, and we all thought that North Shore was very good and like caliber like SAR or something. So we were all going into it. We all thought we could easily lose this game because we thought Elijah could like rip us up. Whatever didn't happen. We locked down Elijah and ripped 7-0. And then when I got pulled, in my opinion, I thought I should stay in to get the chance for the next game. I thought maybe I should get more shots and more playoff experience. That's my first ever game I played in the playoffs. So I don't know. I felt, in my opinion, that I should stay in. But once I got pulled, I realized we're a really good team and like we could beat their ass. We could, or SAR, whoever wins that game. The Salmons, we could take them on, whoever. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, you mentioned, a lot of people thinking that you guys were going to run away with that game. And statistically speaking, yeah, you guys did. You beat them, what, 7-8-2, something along those lines, 8-1 or something like that. I honestly don't remember. It was a while ago at this point. But, at the end of the day, he did that. He, being Elijah Kuehl, did that to a lot of teams this year. He did it. He found some success against DRS. He did it against Flatbush, who was a playoff team. I don't remember if they played SAR. I don't believe they did. Did it to Ori Sorel, who was a team that was fighting for a playoff spot late down the stretch during the regular season. He did that to teams that he thought he could take advantage of. He went in with a game plan. North Shore went in with a game plan, and they executed very well during the regular season. It's just such a shame for them that they had to run into a machine, really, in the semifinal game. And no shots against them, but they were probably the weakest of the 4 teams left in the semis, and they had to go on the road into you guys, a powerhouse, and try to upset. And they stuck with you guys for the first, I want to say, like half of the first period. And then I think when they realized they weren't going to be given a lot of space and, their gym being a lot bigger than one you guys have and not really being able to play the way they like to play and the way they're used to playing, that you guys were able to just get on your game and take advantage and eventually went full throttle and all over them and really just showed them why you guys were the higher seed in the team hosting them. And then you talk about how you feel you deserve to stay in that game, not necessarily for the pride, because everyone knew that you were the starting goalie at that point. There wasn't a question of whether it was going to be you, Zimmerman, or Kalb that was starting in net for the championship game, but more for the fact that you wanted to feel like you had a rhythm going into that game, because pulling you, what was it? I think somewhere in the second period, like late in the second period, you got the end of the second period. So with an entire period left, I get it for the resting aspect, and obviously they don't want to risk injury. And I know that they started playing your teammates a little bit less also. We saw Rousman on the floor a little bit less. We saw pretty much anyone from the top 2 lines. I shouldn't have even mentioned it. It comes to mind as the co-MVP. But, with that being said, I definitely agree with you. I also can see why your coaches did that. If it were me, would I have done that? It's too tough to tell. It's way more of a like in the moment type decision. But, I definitely hear, as a player, I never had to go through an experience like that as a player where I got pulled for the resting aspect. Or I should say I never had the luxury of doing that really in that case. But, definitely an interesting take. And then I want to move on to the championship game, obviously. So you mentioned that, you got pulled. And I said I was going to come back to it in the middle of last question, which is this. So did you feel like you had less of a rhythm going into that DRS game because of the fact that you got the third period off in the semis against North Shore? Or did you kind of just go through your regular routine and not really treat it like it was any
the North Shore
different
game
type
was like
of experience?
almost a month before the DRS game, maybe a little less, maybe 3 weeks on. I totally forgot about it then. We had like 6 or 7 practices in between that. I wasn't thinking about the North game at all. I just went through it normally and like I normally would.
You mentioned how you got there and you mentioned what your thought process was. So now moving on a little bit and kind of transitioning into a different direction, my question to you is, you mentioned not having played in such a long time. So now you're in the championship game and you haven't played in a game, let alone your last game was a playoff game. And you mentioned it was like 3 weeks before the championship, which is odd, by the way, because I think this is the first time that a championship game was played as long as it was after the semifinal game, or as after like both teams had been confirmed in the playoffs. Normally you get it like the semis needs it. Like there are deadlines for the times that these games have to be played, and what happens is the semis generally, at least I don't know. This is what it was like before COVID, because last year I know it was also a little bit different. There was like a week and a half time in advance that we knew who the teams were, and then the championship was was going to be played. But the in previous years, like I'll call it the pre-COVID days, the championship game was played the Sunday, typically the next week, right after the semifinal games had both ended. So that, this obviously left you a lot of time to prepare and get your game ready. But with that being said, for this championship game, you're a starter. You're playing in a game that is of way bigger magnitude than that of your semifinal game against a tougher team, a team that you guys had experience against this regular season, and a team that you guys beat by, I don't want to say a comfortable margin in terms of numbers, but for someone who was at that game, I know it wasn't live streamed, so a lot of people probably didn't catch it, or not as many people caught it as many people probably wanted to catch it. That a lot of people were probably saying you guys were the odds-on favorite to go and win the championship. Especially at the start of the season, but now that you guys had proven it during the regular season, you were good enough to beat everyone. You won 10-0, and then in the championship game, you play probably your toughest game of the regular season. And going into that, you've never started a game of this magnitude before. The semifinals was really your last one, and the semifinals you guys really dominated and pulled away easily. So what's going through your head at that point? Throughout the entire game, what was your mindset? How did you want to play? What was your sort of game plan, to whatever you can speak to? I'm not asking you to give away, your playing secrets or anything, but because I know it as a coach, like having coached you either way, but never having been in a moment that big for yourself to have to
the whole week
before,
the whole time between championship, I was very nervous. Then by the time the game came, like the night before, Saturday night, I don't know why, I just nerves kind of went away. And at the start of the game, I'm actually still nervous, but I was less nervous at Westwood like a week before. So I just did what I normally would do before a game. I probably warmed up a little more, took a little more shots, took it a little more seriously than I normally would, obviously. But then throughout the game, I was kind of just locked in, and I wasn't really thinking about. I was just thinking about the game. I was locked in. I don't remember half things that happened. I just remember normally when I rewatch a game, I remember all the plays, all the saves. Whatever. This game, when I rewatched it, I didn't remember half the plays. I was so locked in. And going into overtime, I was very nervous. I can't lie. And there's a timeout, a minute 30 left in the third period. Robin went over me. He's like, I said, I can't do OT. I'm going to be way too nervous. He's like, hopefully we score. But didn't score, went to OT. And then it was a short OT, thankfully.
Yeah. I was going to say, on top of that, you mentioned overtime, which honestly I wasn't even really thinking about, because you guys really controlled overtime. But I want to go back to about a minute or so left in the game where Micha Khan, a player you're quite familiar playing against and even with, rang one right off the post and beat you glove side. And I know I'm not gonna go on and on about your story and how you got to this point. But everyone knows, and they were saying it on the broadcast, and I said it during the intermission reports that, Forgash seems to be very comfortable with his glove side right now. If I'm DRS, they can't crack you there. Maybe try his blocker, It's not like they were going to hear that during the intermission report either way. But, when in saying that, they still didn't stop shooting glove side, which means, they really wanted to try and test you, I think, and see how on your game I think you really were going to be. And when Micha rips a shot by you like that, which beats you but doesn't go in, what's going through your, is that okay, like the post is my best friend, tap it like Marc-Andre Fleury little type thing there, or is that wow, like
Yeah, the second one.
I've got to get
It
back
was
in
like,
this
wow.
game.
I almost let it in. It's like 30 seconds left, I think it happened. So it's very nerve wracking. I was like, oh my God, we almost just lost. That was so close. But it didn't go in. So that's it.
Yeah. And then also in overtime. So you guys really started by controlling the pace of overtime, and eventually you guys win it. I think just around 2 or 3 minutes in. I remember. The question being though, with you guys controlling the pace, and not just controlling, like you guys are the ones that just happen to have the better percentage of play. Like it was clear cut and dry. Like the ball was in DRS's zone a lot of the time. You guys tried to slow play down. I think that you guys really found a game plan towards trying to end it as fast as you possibly could in a way that wouldn't be, really a risk towards you guys in having to push the pace. And DRS looked like they were possibly at times the faster team, especially late in that third when we saw they had that push. And then Micha Khan rings a post off of you, and they started pairing Pakris with Uden and DRS. As you mentioned, there was a timeout with like a minute and 30 seconds left in regulation, and they're going for the kill shot there because they don't, if I'm DRS, if I have to go to overtime with you guys are the deeper team, you guys are the more experienced team. I want my shot in regulation. I don't want to have to go to overtime and win it there because I know it's going to be harder. And they went for it and they came close, but did not ultimately succeed with that. So my question to you is, how do you stay locked in as a goalie, though, with the play being held in the opposite end? Because I know it's great for you. You're not facing shots, and maybe it takes a little bit of pressure off you. You can relax a little bit more and kind of just like, take in the play, and what you're expecting if it comes back the other way. And it's kind of similar, but on the flip side, even though you had already played 3 full periods of hockey, sometimes you see it, that first shot just catches you. Like we saw it in the varsity game between SAR and Frisch when Jakey Fight scored 25 or 35 seconds into the game, first shot on goal from either side the entire game. And I know it's not overtime, but it's a new setting. It feels like it's the start of something brand new in the sense that the next goal is going to be the game winner. It doesn't matter. There's no time limit in playoffs and overtime in the championship. It's the next one wins it. So, how do you stay locked in, and how do you kind of keep yourself calm in a moment like that when you're not necessarily in as much of a rhythm as you might have been previously in
I
the
would just
game?
lock. That's one of the things you have to work on when you're on a good team that can have the ball deep a lot. You have to be able to stay locked in the whole game, even though you're not getting shots. Personally, I'd rather have more shots. I feel like I play better when I have more opportunities to make saves and get more locked in the game. But when the ball's deep, that's one thing. That's a skill that you have to stay locked in the game and don't lose focus.
And that's pretty much all for the JV season, the JV championship. A couple questions really about certain sequences now before we start to wrap this thing up. So first of all, you guys are on a power play in the championship, your first power play of the game. And I remember Donnie Ostreicher takes a penalty for either roughing or elbow or cross check or whatever it was. I remember because I was the one who had to announce the penalty as the PA system, as the guy in the PA system. But the question being, he comes out of the box. DRS has a great penalty kill. They did a great job. They really, I wouldn't call it necessarily they broke down your power play and picked apart, and were able to pick it apart and took advantage on the PK. But, they took advantage of mistakes that you guys couldn't, or you guys had trouble setting up or running it the way you typically want to run your power play. And right after he comes out of the box, Donnie Ostreicher has a grade A scoring chance in front. And out of nowhere, this crazy bounce in front, and you're there with a sliding across the crease, like crazy glove save, like dropping butterfly. And keep in mind, this is also like a minute and a half, a minute right after you had let up the first goal, and a very similar type of play, and like fundamentally, like sliding across. So what's going through your head there? Is there something that you mentally right away know you need to fix, or is that sort of for you like an instinct type reaction?
So that specific save, I was kind of in position and ready to get it. I didn't really have to move that much. It was kind of ready to hit my glove. But you're talking about the 5-hole goal from before when Aiden Frankel scored it. I said to Robin before the game, like the whole
Yeah.
practices, like before, like past 3 practices, my 5-hole is like really off. So I said to him before the game, like, I need to work my 5 goals. I'm gonna let a 5 goal if I don't fix this like right now, and I need to fix it. And in the game, I scored 5 goal. I went up to him during the exhibition. I was like, wow, this happened. So if he shot a 5 goal, it probably would have went in right there because it's really off on that. But my glove was really on that game. You said before, and I saved a lot of glove side shots. So yeah.
Yeah, your glove was fantastic all game long. You got beat once and it was up. It wasn't even a goal. It was a post. You flashed the leather numerous times in great safe fashion, and also saw you make a couple of plays like a baseball player where you kind of like went and gloved it backhand on a hop or two or right out of midair, and full extension of a first baseman. That was crazy. I then want to move to another sequence where you guys from being down, this isn't necessarily in a play that you make, but the sequence where you guys take the power play and you take advantage of it. You tie that game. What's going through your mind as the goaltender now? Is it, okay, like I want to stay on my game at this point, or it's, like push the offense a little bit more, like keep this away from me. You mentioned that you wanted to stay in the rhythm of shots, but this is overtime, so my question is, you just tied the game. You've got still around half the game left to play. It happened midway through the second period, maybe a little bit later than midway through, but either way, like bottom line, you've still got a lot of hockey left to play. What's going through your mind at that point, other than I'm
Yeah,
assuming just
after
pure
Brendan scored, I
excitement?
was very excited. You can't see it on the camera, but I was super hyped up. And then one of the things I got better at as the season went on. I kind of after every goal I let up, I kind of let it just slip away out of my head, which you have to do as a goalie. You can't let it stay in your head for too long, or else you'll think about everything you do, and then you'll end up being worse. So after I left that goal, I just stopped thinking about it right away. I just made random excuse on like one of the players in my head that's probably fake, and it was a bad goal. It was probably my fault. Defense could have been a little better probably, but I just made up an excuse, said it was my fault, moved on, and I just played the rest of the game like it was the season on the line, which it was.
Right. And now I have two questions left for you. So the first one we didn't get to, but it's the elephant in the room. The reason, or one of the reasons I have you on here is, you were a co-MVP in the championship game. What does that mean to you coming from, backup last year to not knowing whether or not, or not feeling confident in yourself, as you mentioned, that you weren't going to be the starter this year necessarily. And then not only do you become the starter, but you get on a roll, you lock in, you find a rhythm, you know, being pulled in the semifinal game for rest, you say obviously, you feel you deserve to stay in that game. And even though there was a lot of time in between the semifinal game and the championship game, and then you give up that goal and you knew that, something was wrong and you tried to fix it, but you just couldn't. And DRS managed to take advantage of it. And then the tie game, you make game saving save after game saving save, in certain sequences. And then, out of nowhere, Aiden Rousman just wins it for you guys. What was it all like to hear, didn't maybe not even expecting it. Obviously, like the golden goals, it's tough to beat a moment or a play like that. But game MVP, you're on that title right now.
Yeah,
That
so what do you
belongs
ask?
to you. I just asked the question.
Was it me?
Like what. What's that all like for you? Like, what's the experience? It's game MVP. You're last year playing JV hockey. You're moving up to the varsity level next year. Who knows if you're going to start or what? I'm sure Mo has a great plan. For you next year. Regardless of the amount of minutes you play next year, but closing out your JV career with that accolade and more than just the championship,
Yeah,
but game
so
MVP on
it
top of
was
that.
it
What's
was,
that
it was a
all
great
like?
feeling, especially everyone coming after me after the game saying how great I played, amazing. At first, I thought everyone was just saying for confidence reasons like during the game, like and second mission, like everyone goes to me like, "Sure, I played amazing. I played amazing." Like I left a bad goal. I don't know. Am I really like? If people are just saying that, people say a lot. So whatever. So then, end of the game when I got announced as MVP, I felt I deserved it, but at the same time, hearing my name called was like very relieving and like it felt great.
And the last question was probably predicted in advance, but it's a classic. Is there anyone that you want to shout out or give props to? It could be your coaches, anyone in school, your teammates, anyone, for just everything that's gone down over the last couple of weeks,
Yeah,
even
shout
throughout
out
the
to my
entire season.
coaches. They really helped me out, especially Robin, Josh Sika, especially Robin, the goalie coach, really helped me improve my game and helped me us win a ship and me win MVP.
Alrighty. Well, Shia, thank you so much for making this happen and really appreciate the time. Great game, great season. Congrats on it all. The championship title, the co MVP title that you share with Aiden Rousman, who's a familiar face to to this podcast. And with that being said, I want to thank all of the viewers for tuning into this episode of Yeshiva League Pass Faceoff, our 7th episode of the season, sponsored by the Weiselberg Law Firm, reminding everyone once again, choose wisely.
Bye.